if it's either true or false, if you look at the
Could be, yeah.
at the horseshoe, if the ending is true or false, the first antecedent, which is the first wedge, has to be false by the nature of the truth table. Because when that wedge is false on both occasions, it's either wait, hold on, I got my vocabulary.
No, you're onto something. We don't know any symbol's truth value for certain. You still
Yeah, right.
a
So
plan.
on the horseshoe, it's true.
This one.
So the first one, if the first wedge is false, if you put an F there, like put an F there,
Here?
that's right there. Put
Yeah.
an F right there. If you put an F right there, FT, then the ending, the last wedge could be true or false.
That's right.
It could be either or.
That's right. That might be a time saver.
So you could put a slash.
Yeah. You know, this is pretty much the same thing, but this is a simpler component. We already know something about it. By the same reasoning, if we made this wedge true, it wouldn't matter what all this is, right?
Right.
Same sort of reasoning. Let's see. Make that wedge true, and therefore you would have to be true, right? I'm going to mark that as where we embarked on this assignment. It is speculative.
Transfer value.
But look here. On the assumption that that wedge is true, it doesn't matter what that wedge is, right? So O doesn't matter. Now let's see what happens here. We make that U true, we transfer that. And this horseshoe must be preserved as being true. What can you tell me about that curl? What can you tell me about that wedge? What can you tell me about this G?
It's false, and so is the curl.
But
And that's true, but that's not possible.
that's a contradiction. Okay,
The speculation is wrong.
need to go back to where we embarked upon this. And that is right there. He says if we make that wedge false, right? Doesn't matter what that wedge is. So if we make this wedge false, what can you tell me about that O?
That doesn't work either.
And that curl?
False.
That won't work. Right? So I would say, what would you say about this example?
It's valid
Why?
because in either way that we tried it, there's two contradictions in it.
That's right. Assuming that this consequent is true, we found a contradiction here. Assuming that antecedent is false, we found a contradiction right there. It's got to be one or the other. So this can't be completed. Now that requires, I think, a lot of confidence in our assumptions. I think I wouldn't put something like that on the test. I would like the things on the test to be more complete before we make the claim, okay, I'm satisfied, this can't be done. That one was pretty tricky. I think we'll do a confidence builder, and then I'm going to change things up a little bit. Too much of the same thing, not good. Well, I don't know if this is a confidence builder, but I think we'll be able to complete it. No, not that one. All right. We have to break it up into two columns. Okay, it's long and has a lot of letters, but I have a feeling that this one's going to go down pretty easily. Not really a feeling. Wonder if anybody wants to come up and give it a go. Yeah, I think some of the first few assignments are going to open things up pretty much. Because right now, I'll tell you what, there are, after the initial assignment, so a whole bunch of symbols that we know. One, two, three, four, 5 symbols at this time that we know. Anybody want to try your hand? Here, I'll point out all the symbols we know. Yeah? Okay, sure, yeah.
Do I have to go up there? 'Cause I don't want to go up there. I'm camera shy.
Oh, okay. Well, then we're just going to be doing, he's just going to answer all the questions that I'm asking. Nobody wants to come up?
Come on, somebody.
Look, we know those 2 symbols. We know that symbol. We know those 2. Do it kind of nice and slow so we can see what you're doing.
Alright. So, right off the bat, if this one's true, then this one has to be false.
That's a good place to start for a couple of reasons. You're going to finish off that premise all at once. Go ahead and circle that T under the curl.
Alright. And J, there's a J right here.
He's finding other occurrences of J. There's only one, it looks like. He's making that false.
The second one is this. The only time that the dot is true is when this one and this one are true.
There you go, both conjuncts, those being the horseshoes.
So that's that. I'm going to pause on that because if this is false, this has to be true and this needs to be false.
Okay, in the conclusion, it's false horseshoe. The antecedent D has to be true, and the consequent wedge has to be false.
D,
It's going to find other D's.
true there.
Looks like this one of them.
Which the only time it's false is when both disjuncts.
Yep, going back to the conclusion. And does that,
This one's done.
yes, it satisfies that assumption. He's going to find G's.
I,
There's another G. There's another one somewhere. Did you do something in that first premise besides putting F under G? Did I? You made that I false
which I?
in the, I'm sorry, in that fourth premise.
Fourth premise. Yeah, because it's false down here.
Oh, so you transferred that?
Right.
Okay. And now you're transferring G.
Right.
Okay.
It's false here,
Okay.
it's false here, it's false here.
Yep.
And it's also there.
Yep.
There's an I that's here too.
Uh-huh.
So this one's false.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Now, you know what?
So it's false, true, false. So false, true, false. Okay, so this is okay.
Yeah.
Right here, if this is false, this has to be true.
Okay, the curl has to be true if G is false.
So this is true, false. No, this is true, true. So this has to be true. Okay? Oh no, this has to be true.
The
which is
curl?
false. The curl has to be true, so it could be true, true, true.
You know what? That curl doesn't have to be true.
It does not. True, true. Oh, it could be false
Yeah,
as well.
right.
So it doesn't matter.
Take that away from H too. Okay. Now you can use your stroke on that curl, and you could also use the stroke on H, because if it doesn't matter what the curl is, it doesn't matter what H is.
Right.
There. It might matter what H is somewhere else,
Over there.
right? But I think you can go ahead and circle that
But
T
this
under the
one's
dot.
done. So here,
You've got an H.
here.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay, does it matter there maybe? I
Well,
should shut up and let you go. I'm going to shut up.
well, let's see. This wedge right here,
Don't worry about it.
if this is false.
That's a mistake I made last time. Can't do anything there.
Nah, I know.
There you
I
go.
was looking at this one.
Somewhere here.
Okay. This is true. These two are false. So this is false.
Yes.
True, false. And this has to be false. This has to be
The
false.
curl has to be
So
false,
this is true.
making E true. And I think you can go ahead and circle that T under the...
True.
Okay.
So E is true up there. Any of these, no. Okay. Let's see. Okay, if this is true, then this has to be true,
Regardless.
and this doesn't matter.
There you go. I think you could circle that T under that horseshoe
This
there.
is true. This doesn't matter. Okay, so just I think this one. Alright.
Okay, listen. You're trying to keep that horseshoe true and the antecedent
right.
is already false.
False.
What can you tell me about that consequent?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter what the wedge is, therefore it doesn't matter what H is, and they can circle that T. It's done.
So it's invalid.
That's right. Well, this is better than I do. What were you? What do you guys think? Are you picking it up? Yes? Well, I don't know what the author has in the back of the book under these sections, but he doesn't really tell you how to do it. You're going to have to practice up on your own, I think. And then 2 weeks from now, when we come back from that break, we need to get a lot done. But I don't want to just do all of this tonight. I think we'll just let's try reading some statements and maybe translating some into English. Change things up a little bit. Probably the best thing to do is translate English. There we go. We see it?
It's too bright, no?
It's too bright?
On screen.
It's a nice shaded room.
Good.
That's good, huh?
Yeah.
See if we're in the picture.
It's gotta come up a little bit.
There we go. Now, have we practiced translating some English language arguments into symbolic? We've done something with that? A little bit.
For the long.
Okay, let's just do this for a few minutes. That would have been a good night, I think. They start out real short and easy. That's okay. Now, let me remind you of some things. These are the uppercase letters that you use to translate the simple. This is 380. These uppercase letters, this so-called key here, that's what you must use to translate the simple English statements. Now, the order in which these letters occur in the key, that's the order in which they'll appear in your translation, but not necessarily in the English. Third, on the test, I actually write out what the simple statements are next to the letters in the key to help you out.
Thank you.
And then, he should do it too. Most books do. And then fourth, you're to take these to represent or translate affirmative statements. It's up to you to recognize when something is negated in English and therefore apply a curl. Each complete sentence of the English language argument is either an entire premise or the conclusion. You can't break up an English sentence into 2 lines of translation, that is like 2 premises, okay? And then, last but not least, the author and I will always have the conclusions last in an English language argument. They don't have to be. You can state your conclusion anytime you want to, but this eases a little bit of the pressure, the burden of trying to find out what the conclusion is. So we're going to take this first sentence here, from either to the period. And we'll notice that it's a compound statement, right? Now this says the manager didn't notice the change. Well, should I apply a curl there or not? There's no need to at this time. You wouldn't at this time. Only if you find this statement clearly affirmed elsewhere. That would be the manager did notice the change. Then you would go back here and apply a curl. There's no need to apply a curl there at this time. Let's look ahead a little bit here, save some time. He did notice the change. Okay, so we're gonna make this curl N. A wedge goes there, right? We say the word or when we come to a wedge. And this is going to be A. He approves of it. So that's a pretty simple translation. I think it's going to be curl N wedge A. No punctuation needed. Or is there? Ooh. What do you think? Those don't mean the same thing. Do you think we need parentheses here? No. The first word in that English sentence is either. So that's not introducing a negation, as in my second translation. That's a negation right there. The second one. Right? That first one is correct. We've got just curl N with A. Then the second sentence, here's what we saw is the affirmative of this negation. So our second premise is simply going to be N. And the conclusion is simply going to be You know what I think we should do? A long truth table proof. Just to refresh our memory of that. It's only going to be 4 rows long, right? Because we're going to square 2. The square refers to 2 simple statements, 2 unique ones, N and A. That formula always starts out with 2, and you raise it to the power. You remember this from last week?
Yes.
You raise it to the power equal to the number of unique, simple statements. And there are 2 of them. So we're squaring 2. That 4 means we're going to have 4 rows, left to right, in our truth table. You divide that by 2. That means under the first simple statement, we're going to alternate T's and F's by 2, beginning with T. Divide that by 2 again. That means we're going to alternate T's and F's by 1 under the second simple statement. Always beginning with T. And then you're going to be transferring those columns to the other N and A. So this is what your truth table would look like for starters. First column under N. A's column, according to our formula. Reproduce those under the other N and the A. Those are called the initial guide columns. Now you need to complete the rows, the columns for all symbols in the first premise before moving on to the second premise. So here's our first premise right here. We have 2 symbols that need columns of truth values. Now, in this procedure, see, you're starting with the simplest components, and then you're moving to the next most complex symbol. Or in other words, in this first premise, those 2 remaining symbols, which one can we determine the truth value of from what's already there? The curl or the wedge? the curl, because the truth value of that wedge is a function of A, which we have, and the curl, which we don't have. So we can't complete this column yet. You've got to do the curl first. So you're simply going to be reversing n's column, correct? Because that's what a curl does. So now, the truth value of that wedge is a function of A on one side and the curl, right? Different sorts of things you have to watch out for with this procedure. Truth value of that wedge is a function of A on the right and the curl on the left. So we're looking at a false disjunct and a true disjunct. That's a true wedge. False, false, that's a false wedge. True, true, true wedge. True, false, false wedge. Okay, so the first premise is done. Second premise is done, it's just n. And the conclusion is done. I guess we're ready to go. So on your test, to make sure that you're actually doing your long truth table, I'm going to simply ask the true-false statement. The column of T's and F's under the first premise, the symbol of the first premise is as follows. And I might say true, false, true, true. So you just look at your column of truth values. If that's what it is, then that would be a true answer. If I said the column of truth values under the symbol of the first premise is false, true, false, false, you would see, no, that's not right. He said false, true, false, false. It's not that. That would be a false answer. I might ask you about an entire row. Like the first row, the truth values in the first row of this argument form's truth table are. And I might have them listed. False, true, 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 true. You'd simply match them up to your truth table. That would be a true answer. Okay, but let's see if we remember how to read this. We're looking for at least one row on which the premises are true and the conclusion is false. Now you're no longer concerned about that, or that. You're concerned about the premises column. That's the wedge. And of course the second premise is simply N, and the conclusion is C. So let's see. Row 1, true, true, true. That doesn't mean anything. False, true, false, true, false, true, true, false. We have no rows on which the premises are true and the conclusion is false. What does that mean? It means it's valid. How many of those rows would it take to prove invalidity?
Just one.
Just one. So do you understand why this means nothing, the fact that they're all true? That could be the case in a valid or an invalid argument. So remember, it's the presence of an invalidating row, that is, true premises and a false conclusion, that proves invalidity. It's the absence of any such row that proves validity. See, there's no positive ID for validity in this case, this procedure. It's the absence of an invalidating row. I think we should do at least one more. Well, let's go ahead and do number 2. No sense in too complicated right now. We'll go next week to do that. Let's see, we're gonna use C for oxygen in the tube combined, it looks like. We're going to use V for, I'm sorry, it looks like C for the simple statement, the oxygen in the tube combined with the filament to form an oxide. V for the statement, the oxygen in the tube vanished completely. This is what he's keying on. So in our first sentence, we have both of our simple statements. The word or indicates that it's at this junction of the two. So our first premise is simply going to be C with V. Second premise. The oxygen in the tube could not have vanished completely. What do you want to do with that?
It's a curl V.
Curl what? Agreed? It says it did vanish completely. It says it could not have. And then our conclusion. The oxygen in the tube combined with the filament to form an oxide. What do you think? Let's go ahead and knock out a long truth table. I'm sure you guys can handle this one. These are our initial guide columns there. Agreed? Now you complete the columns for the first premise before moving on. There's only one symbol remaining. We have everything we need to determine the truth value of that wedge. That is C and V. So our first premise is that wedge. Now the second premise is a curl. Our conclusion's already done. What do you think? Valid or invalid?
Valid.
Why?
Because there is no row in which both premises are true and the conclusion is false.
You are right, sir. No row on which both premises are true and the conclusion false.